First thing you want to do is you always want to start with some form of reference. And if I open up my reference page here and I look through here, our responsibilities are to design a vehicle for GI Joe or Cobra. So there's going to be certain guidelines that are going to already adhere. So one thing I like to do, first thing I would do is I'd go back and look at some of the already established toy design and reference that you might see. And you'll notice there's turrets, some of them have tank tread, they have offensive and defensive traits, okay? You'll start to notice when you look at some of these, you'll start to notice the silhouette shape that's taking place. Okay, nothing is clustered, nothing is together. That's why when you look at any of these models, even if it's a current airplane, whatever it might be, this is sort of clustered because that's a bike. We're not doing a bike though. We're going to be working on vehicles. I mentioned this was a little bit outdated right here. Okay, the scale on this is a little bit smaller to the guy, but still you could do something like that if it had treads on it. You could just follow the guidelines of the assignment. You could have something that might be a boat and fan. It could be a vehicle that can be used on sea and air, on land, whatever. Just, use your imagination, have fun with it. What I really like and find appealing about designs like this is look at the silhouette shape. Look at the read from here down to here and then back across here. And that's what's really important in part of our design process, is establishing really nice silhouette reads. Now, some of you guys as modelers have never really had to think about silhouette shapes before. That's why I put this up here, is this is what not to do, okay? It's one big clunky shape and there's no other secondary detail. What's funny is this looks like it's the, looking at the writing up here, it's like the cheaply made security car for to transport the local mayor around in or something, But the reference that I did like that I found, this felt a little bit like it could expand outward in terms of its overall detail, but I like the shape of the gun up here. I like this little nodular canopy area for the cockpit, okay, that covers right here. I still would want to add something coming out here. I feel there's a lot more that could be done in that. If you get a chance, you can go look up the Batmobile and you'll find some great front, rear, and side view shots of it. There's a tremendous amount of really nice geometric shape detail on this that really gives it a futuristic feel. That if you look right over here just in the paneling, you have all this really cool paneling at multiple angles and stuff. Incorporate that into your design. Look at the canopy on this vehicle for where the main character sits. Okay, it's very covered. It has a nice protective feature to it. You need to think about some of that and apply some of that into your design. What I liked about this is I like the body and the fenders in here. I'm not too hip on the mud train tires, and then I really like the canopy and the side gun up here. This is nicely designed. The tires aren't too bad. I just feel like I could find another solution to add more to that. I didn't design that. That's just the reference I found online when I was looking around. And I also find some of this other light armored vehicle reference here. Okay, that looked really nice. I like this speeder here. Okay, these are Polaris treads that are available for their off-road vehicle called the Razor. Okay, this is a really nice tank. Okay, this has treads. It has, just looking at it, look at the feel that it has with like a footprint. You see that? How it feels like there's a front section here, a rear section. So whenever you start to thumbnail, that's an important thing to do, is you find something that influences you. So I'm going to take that footprint idea and think of a foot having a heavy section and a smaller section in the back. And then what I also wanted to do is immediately when I saw this, after I saw this, I was also thinking about a spider influence. So I'm going to think, as I start to sketch in my thumbnail process, spiders and footprint, the shape of a foot. So if I look at my shoe, look at the bottom of my shoe, I can look right now, I have this large section in the front, smaller section in the rear, right, for the heel of my foot. And so I'm going to try to imply that into my design as I start. That gives me some type of jumping ground. And then I found somebody else's silhouette studies here. So in Photoshop, you don't have to use Photoshop. Like I said, you can do this at home. What I'm going to do is I just start off with like a really base layer, and I have all black here, okay? And I just go in here and I just start sketching up part of my idea. And what I like to do is I have this pencil brush here that I sort of sketch with first. And then I'll come back and fill in my shapes. So when I'm thinking of a footprint, I'll come in here like this, and I think of, that's the front of my foot, that's the smaller section of my foot back here, And then I might think of something, I was thinking about something spider related, so I might have some type of influence of a spider legs or something on top of here, and then I might have some type of tank treads. Now, again, this is a silhouette shape. I'm not expecting to get my first drawing to be the perfect drawing. This is a series of stepping stones for me to jump in and examine. Like, just putting the turret like that horizontally isn't really that attractive. There's not much happening in here, so I realize I need to go in here and sort of find a way to push back some of these shapes and increase some of the shape to make it look visually appealing. Okay, so I start to come in here and I get something like that now, and I'm like, hey, maybe there's a big protective front plate, maybe there's some type of other turret or shape here, protective canopy. Now I haven't filled this in black yet. Okay, so a lot of artists work in a traditional manner where they go in their sketchbooks and they just use a Sharpie pen. If I want to fill this in black, I come over here and I have this other solid brush right here that allows me to sort of come in here and fill in little areas here. So what's important for me in doing this is, the reason why we start with silhouette shapes first is that it focuses our mind on the outside shape with no detail. And that's what's important. If we get something that reads, that's visually appealing right now, it's going to be much more successful when we take it to that sort of finished phase. So I have like an angle in that track there. I have another track here. Might have something down here. Have a little bit of a space. Have another sort of angle there. I had a turret going across. I might have some other type of element here. And so that might be my first one. Okay. Some of you have never, how many people have never had Photoshop in here? Right? Right? Many of you have never had it, right? So you might not want to work in this. I like working in this because what I can do quickly is come in here, take a design I just did. I can copy and paste it. I could bring it over here. And what I can do is I could transform it like this. And now I might say that that's sort of 1 foot. Okay. I can grab that, bring that over here. I could translate that, sort of put that on the other side, make it look a little bit larger, let's say like so. Okay. And then I could paste the original back up on here like this. And this is sort of an experimentation method where I can come in here like this, and then I can merge all these layers together really quick, and I could start figuring out if there's something inside this shape in here that I like that I didn't see before. So maybe now I've sort of expanded my shapes. This was my first one here was sort of a real simple approach to what I was doing. Okay. Now I have something with a totally different front end that might have multiple sections of tread that's on it. Okay. I might even come in here. I would adjust my brush. I might even make this. Oops. Meant to go up this way. Make this turret look a little bit different, a little bit more angle there. Now look, see how I got to that? That's a lot more successful than my first one. That's exactly what I want to do. Now that I'm done with that, I can come over here in Photoshop. I can select this guy right here. Okay? I can copy and paste him. I'm going to bring him over here. And I really like to focus in thinking about things normally that I wouldn't do. So I like the possibility of having shapes come out of something else. Like that looks sort of cool, like it could be some type of turret spot, and then I can mount that on some type of a tank or vehicle in here. So now I'm going to come in with my brush and see what happens if I come in like this and then I'll rescale this. Okay, but the point of this is to have fun, use your imagination, and think about the shapes that you're working on. See where it takes you. These are, I talk about stepping stones. That's the importance of visual sketching like this. Just thinking about and I like that feel there. See what I just got? I got like this round pod here. It looks like I might have like a protective shield or something here. And then I might have some other base element back here that's like a huge tread that comes down. Okay, come back in, take my eraser, erase part of it off right in here. Put a little right there, okay? And then if I come back in, I'll just scale that up. And you can see quickly, I'm just on my third one here. I can start to get some really fantastic design solutions. So I like that one right there quite a bit because it has a neat feel. I like the idea, what if I have multiple treads and then I elevate and create more of a silhouette in the center, somewhat similar to a spider. So what I like to do as I progress on this is, again, try to work as fast as I can and as easy as I can. So I might copy and paste this right here. Bring that over here now. That might be like part of my front tread. I might have another section that's back here, but I'm going to flip this, right click in here, tell it to flip horizontally. Okay. Bring that up, let's say about right here. I might take another one and mess around with shapes, see what I get right in here. Okay, merge all my layers together real quick, select them all, Control E, come in here. So I was thinking, what if I had some type of Y support arm with like hydraulics that connect in here? And again, remember Cobra versus G.I. Joe, right? Different types of vehicles here. Might be some hoses here. Might be some other base element. Maybe I have part of a turret that comes off this way. Now see, that's a pretty cool design. Now I got another design that I like that I could start working with. Okay, and the more I get into these, what I don't like to do as I'm progressing forward in these is I don't want to come back in here and start like over detailing this. That's what you don't want to do. Look, if I go to Eraser right now and I come in here and I start going, this is where the guy climbs up, and oh, let's see what's happening. Let me merge it all. This is where he climbs up, and I'm going to have this little, there's going to be steps here. It's getting to be too much. I don't need to do all that right now. I just want to dive into this and have fun. Okay. All right. Okay. So sorry about that. I just had to fix something with my layers there. So as I continue with this recording here, I just made a comment to the class that when I look back at this, I like this sort of round effect that was starting to happen in here. Okay, and so I want to see if I can come over and start including some of that. And again, I look back at my first one, and my first one looks horrible now. But again, I just had to rough something out. I had to get something down. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll just come back in here, and I'll just start to clean up part of my first one, and I might add some other elements that I wasn't thinking about before. So I was thinking of now having some type of rounded canopy structure in here. So that's cool. Now I just say I rounded it off and I sort of made that front section piece there, and then I have this like protective plate that might come here. There might be a pod there. So now I'm really starting to get some fun shapes in here. I like what's sort of developing in there. Now, once you get better at your silhouettes, I have this brush that I just had modified from a couple other brushes. I really love it. I like to come in here and just sort of sketch with this guy I really like, but then I'll fill it in black. I'll just use this as an opportunity to throw something down. It's easy to get stuck in this process, so a little hint of what you can do is think of something really quick like a spider. Okay, so I'm going to think of the silhouette right now of a black widow, or actually a brown widow, because I have a ton of brown widows at my house. And brown widows are really nasty spiders because they are more venomous than a black widow. Okay, and so they have this weird sort of shape. Their upper it's like not quite a circle. It's like a pinched water drop, sort of like this. See what I mean? And then they have this like little section, and then they have this like funky looking head, and then they have these long sort of legs that come in here, right? So one thing that I like to do when I design is I like to think about how I might be able to imply something from nature into part of my design and see where that might get me, you know. Maybe I end up having a larger size tread here in the back like this, and you know, I've been doing that tread idea there for a little bit, so now I'm like, nah, let's go a little bit different. So maybe I just need to think outside the box. Again, go for something that you normally wouldn't do. Maybe this guy has just these long arms that come up here, and then there's treads on those with some protective plate or something. Okay, so this is where I like switching back. Focus on the silhouette shape and see where it takes me. See, I took that shape and I flipped it upside down, and then I was thinking, what if I had that with these treads here, like this? Ah, see, check that out. That's pretty cool. It's got like this big head plate, maybe guns and something in the back here, and then it has this really cool looking. So that's what's cool. Look at that. I can move stuff around and have fun with it. I don't like working on 20 different layers. I like to commit to it. Find what you're doing. I like this accident that I had. This looks like a front canopy of some kind here with like lights on it. Got a little bit of a tangency happening down here, so I'm going to trim some of this off. Okay. That's pretty cool. It's different, you know. Come back here and take my see what I can do with this guy. Oh, that's cool. I just saw it. That could be a turret right there. So if I go like this and I flip it horizontally, okay. get some music back on. I hate working in silence. All right, I'm going to continue here with what I'm working on, and I actually had to stop here. I had a student in the background who was playing some music, and I had to go back and re-record over and do a voice narration over the rest of my thumbnail here. So just bear with me. So unfortunately, I had this video already finished, and YouTube had rejected it because it was copyright infringement. So I had to go back in and make sure even the slightest sound of a student's headphones in the back with music playing was copyright infringement to YouTube. So here I am just doing a voice narration back over this. So just bear with me. I'm just going to try to talk about what's sort of going through my mind when I'm working on this. Right now, like I mentioned before when I showed you guys the reference, I'm really inspired by a lot of geometric shapes. And so as I'm drawing and working in here, I'm really trying to incorporate some size variation and some basic geometric shapes. And of course, something else that I've been doing in here as well is, using Photoshop to its fullest abilities of copying and pasting, transforming, moving items around. Especially, there's a whole accidental process that can take place when you're copying and pasting different elements and seeing where that takes you. So a lot of times, I'll work on something for a little bit, then I'll leave, and like here, now I'm coming back here, I'm going to erase a little bit of this guy, I'll come back, I might paste into it, or just keep working from there. And, I sometimes if I work on just one item, I can't make a final decision right there. I have to leave it, go away, get a fresh set of eyes, and come back and look at it again. So let me start a new sketch here. I think this is really a good part of the overall design process. Is there's an exploratory phase on your own, which comes from looking at reference and being influenced by shapes that you see. And then there's also another sort of secondary phase that takes place where once you've started creating something, you might come up with other resolutions or problem-solving ideas from that particular sketch. So you're sort of influencing yourself from your own artwork. And I think that's a really great part of the overall design process and part of the overall ideation process to, go from step A to D and come up with some successful design. So I'm going to start this guy off here. I sort of had this idea of like a scorpion, and it feels a little weird that I'm having to voice over this second time over, but because I'm forgetting exactly what I was thinking when I originally did it, but that's okay. This is the beauty of Camtasia and doing another voiceover over, so that way I can get this guy up on YouTube and share it. So let's see what direction I was going in here. One thing I know about myself quite a bit is whenever I work, I tend to, try to explore quite a bit, and I tend to think of what I might normally think of, and then I try to go outside of the box and counteract myself, if that makes sense. So if I was going to draw a square, then I come back and go, okay, instead of drawing a square, let's draw a rectangular shape that has geometric edges to it, that has some type of geometric angles to it. If I'm going to draw something flat, what if I go the opposite and bend it? I like to think like that. If I go something small, what if I go a small triangle, large triangle? Just try to have, there's just some basics of composition that are taking place there. And again, not to sound like a crazy person, but, talk to yourself a little bit. I do it all the time when I'm working. I talk to myself, and, I sort of ask myself questions. And what was it, that old proverb about get to know thyself? There's so much truth in that about, having the ability to think about what you're doing and having the ability to ask yourself questions. We all have that little voice that clicks on in the back of our mind. sometimes that little voice comes out in other times, when you're doing something stupid, or when you're doing something you shouldn't be doing. I like to think I had that little voice when I was a kid, when I was tying a skateboard onto the back end of a motorcycle. My buddy was going to pull me down the street when I was in 7th grade. That little voice came in and told me it wasn't a good idea. And 20 minutes later, when I had crashed and my knees were all banged up and I ran home crying, I sort of had realized that it wasn't a good idea at all. And all my senses sort of came together at the end there. But when I'm working here, it's the same principle. I'm just sort of thinking to myself, how can I expand the shape? What can I push out? What are little bits and details that might make this shape a little bit more interesting? And sometimes you're not always going to come up with a winning idea, but it's the fact that you tried and try to get yourself to that point of view. A lot of times I create what I call stepping stones, where once I'm in this design process, I actually end up creating an idea that I can use later and go off of. Okay. And here was part of that mistake right there. Do you see that? I had some music playing in the background, which I've learned from doing demos is a big no-no, because YouTube will not let you put your work up. Apparently, they have as we know, like with iPhones, they have an automated system that can tell who the music is. They can even email, because that's the email I got from YouTube, is that they went ahead and emailed the provider, and the provider said that they were not allowed to use this music in this demo. And I was like, well, that sucks. So much for giving an overall shout out for the music. I would have more than happy, promoted it. But that is copyright infringement, and we have to stay attest to that. So here I am, sketching a little bit more. I'm thinking about going back in a couple of my ideas. I'm actually going over things that I like. Now that I have a fresh set of eyes, I can look back. I really like this cannon on this guy right here. It has a real powerful feeling to it, and that silhouette reminds me of like the German howitzer. So that's something else that I find that helps too. Whenever I do, any particular study, whether it's for prop design, creature design, vehicle design, one of the first things I do is I go do a ton of research just to find out, some basic, shape language or geometric patterns that might apply to what it is that I want to work on. And then I could take those patterns or sensibilities that have been designed by others and see if I can't expand on them and go to sort of another level, and I think that's part of the benefits of getting to draw and design, is just adding on to your work. So let me pause here for a second, get my thoughts. All right, so just gonna keep, knocking this guy out, sketching on it. I'm gonna just take a little break here, not talk as much, so I could just let the mind go with what I'm sketching here. It's funny when someone asks me, I have students that I've talked to before, like, what's your process? What's this? It's just exploratory. It's like anybody's process. There are certain little tricks or trades that you learn with, massing of different shapes. What I should say is that there are they're compositional tricks that you learn over time that have to deal with, learning a lot about composition. And that comes from being around lots of great artists, looking at great work and being influenced. And, there's so much to say about composition in terms of shapes and variation and unity and rhythm and balance. And so, I don't think anyone's necessarily a total master of composition. A lot of the professional guys that I've worked with and that I know, they wouldn't say that they are, but they do their best to adhere to a certain stance of knowing what they know and trying to make that make their knowledge come out in their work. And so, I think part of that overall progression is just being able to ask yourself questions. And I think that's an important part of the design process. If you're just working and you're not being exploratory, you're not doing anything. Look at this shape here. I just transformed that shape, and I really like that shape. Boy, that has just like a cool ship shape right inside it. And again, I'm just taking something, I'm using a stepping stone here. I'm grabbing a shape that I've already created, and I'm trying to go back into it and see how I can modify it and alter it and use that to my benefit. And what I'll do is this previous sketch I was doing over here, I'll come back to it, and I'll work on it. And I happen to see something for that moment. I grabbed it and put it down. Have you ever had that instance happen to you where you had an idea about something and you should write it down, and then you don't write it down, and then like 3 minutes later you've totally forgotten the idea? There's something really to say about that in the art process. A lot of that has to do with your cognitive memory and the way that we memorize and learn things. And if you have a great idea for something and you don't commit it to your memory, which means you don't repeat it a certain amount of times and get it ingrained into from your short-term memory into your long-term memory, you're going to lose it. And so if you happen to look over and you see an interesting shape when you're doing a silhouette, bam, you come over and grab part of that element that you had there and just paste it over. And that's what I did. I just went to copy and paste something to try to get me along in the development of this vehicle, and look, all of a sudden I have this another little silhouette that could guide me along in my next silhouette shape progression that I'm working on here. So anyway, I'm just going to draw a little bit. Whenever I talk, I tend to talk too much. Trying to clean off these edges here, get them nice and straight. Still could pull them down a little bit more. I like that turret though, like that. It sort of looks like a stationary unit. Those could be tank treads down below. They could also be some type of support system. So what I was saying about reference, every now and then I'll be flipping through a cable and I'll see something really cool channel. A couple years ago, they had a really fascinating show on about weapons of what was the terminology exactly? Like best weapons of 2012 or something. I mean, we're in 2014 right now, but 2013, but about to go 2014. But point being is that if there's any of those shows that come up, and talk about the best weapons of the past decade or something like that, it's sort of interesting to watch, to see what man has created and the thoughts that have come from. I mean, imagine where we're going to be 20 or 30 years from now. Nobody has any idea what current technology the government of United States or of China has hidden away, right? Nobody knows any of that stuff. It's all top secret. So it's sort of fascinating when you're working on your designs here. You're getting to help decide, and you're getting to be the Leonardo da Vinci for the King of France. The King of France hired Leonardo to come up with ideas and concepts for war. And as an artist, he sat there and he used his creative thoughts and his ideation process. He invented the tank, invented the helicopter. I even think he invented some base body armor. He invented some really cool cannons, torturing devices. Leonardo also invented this cannon that shot out this series of balls that were tied together with a chain. They were like welded together, and then the chain would open up, and instead of it affecting one or maybe two people, the chain would spread out when it was shot, and it would basically act as a razor blade and would cut in half like 5 to 8 people, because this chain would open up and expand out, the overall length of a car. And imagine that being shot from a cannon right at you in an army. It would have a very devastating effect. So, Leonardo was one of those individuals that came up with ideas to, for that time period. Obviously they were limited by their constructions and the materials that were available to them, and wood and technology, of course. But we're here coming up with ideas that could one day be very plausible in some type of military or overall society. I mean, this one on the left here, when I was sketching that, sort of reminded me of like the M1 Abrams tank, which I've seen quite a bit, and that's some reference that I'd looked at. So this shape right here, I mean, I was thinking of like a little crab sort of floating around with this sort of large head. I think I could take this and I can work off this a little bit more, add a little bit more to it. It's just sort of curious, what if I expanded it, got it really large? Yeah. So here I'm just sort of floating ideas. Maybe I can transform it, modify it, erase some of it, take parts of it. I know it's can be a little slow at times, but just bear with me. This is one thing I'd like to teach you is as part of the overall process of what I call happy accidents. When I was an art student, when I was studying, when I was 18, 19, I had some really great instructors. One particular was Marshall Vandruff, who I was really lucky because he just started teaching, and I got to studying him underneath him for numerous years. And I remember Marshall talking about happy accidents, and when artists would be working with watercolor or paint and accidentally spilling or making a wash, flow a certain way that and you didn't mean to, and you end up coming back into it. And there's a lot there, there's a lot that you can take and run with and you can develop. And there's something to say about that mode of thinking. I mean, look at this. I'm creating something that has a totally different feel, and it's basically all from one original sketch. I'm just modifying it. I mean, imagine if I sat down for 20 minutes and copy and pasted from all of my other sketches what type of cool shapes I might be able to come up with, without even intentionally thinking about it. So it's a great thing about those accidents. I also had a really great watercolor instructor. His name was Don Hendricks, and unfortunately he had passed away in an accident. He was riding his bike to school and was hit by somebody who ran a light in Fullerton, and unfortunately was killed on the scene. And it was really sad. I remember that day waiting in watercolor for him. And but one of the things that he used to talk about was throwing down. He would just he was such an amazing watercolorist. He had galleries all over the world, and he would sell his work, and he just loved to teach on the side. And I just inspired him so much. And he would sit there and work, and a lot of what he did was just he'd like throw washes down, and then he would find paintings and subject matter inside the wash, if that makes sense. Basically one of his big points that he would focus on with us as artists was never start with just a white piece of paper. I mean, a white piece of paper can be totally intimidating. He was referring to a white canvas, but there's a lot to say about that because it is intimidating when something's white. And thank God for programs like Photoshop and Painter and Sketchbook Pro, which allow you to go in there and copy and paste and move things around really quick. I mean, obviously, Photoshop is the king of the kings in that arena. Sketchbook Pro is pretty cool too. Has some great marker abilities and great sketching sensitivity, but doesn't have the copy and paste, and I should say the transformation techniques that Photoshop has. But it's a different program. It wasn't really made for that. So, excuse me. So now I'm going to try to piece together another guy here and see what I come up with. Just sort of baby steps. I should do another demo. Sometimes when I work, I just take my lasso tool, the free form draw, not the straight edge, and I just do a bunch of circles, and then I just sort of paint over that and see what I come up with, and then I do a couple more and see where it takes me. That's a great part of that overall progression and that overall ideation process. All right, let me finish blocking this guy in. I'm trying to be a little bit more. In one of my other classes, I did a demo once doing silhouettes, and a lot of times when I do silhouettes, I'm very rough with them. I'm going into a lot more detail, and because of that, I'm spending a lot more time in this process of recording and sort of drawing and talking about it, because I'm trying to get some of those real finite details and shadows and little hoses and increments that might support a tire or support a body, hydraulics, lights, weaponry, hoses for ammo that might be coming in, exhaust vents, valves, all that kind of stuff. A lot of times when I draw, I work real rough first and I go for basic shapes, and then I come in and sort of do the details. But in this demo here, I'm actually starting more with just sort of a line, and then I'm sort of doing the details as I go. But usually when I work, again, I'm 40 minutes into this, and I already have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, about 10 or 11 thumbnails, which I really like. And for 40 minutes, I mean, that's a pretty awesome amount of time to come up with some really fun ideas that are going to add as stepping stones for me to go to that next process. And one of the process I like one of the processes that I like to do is when I finish my side views here, I'll take my top side views that I've drawn, and then I'll do a 3/4 thumbnail view in Silhouette Study, just to show what it is I'm thinking and the direction that I'm going into. And you never know what you might come up with. You can come up with something totally different. Again, that's the benefit. It's the fun aspect. That's cool. That looks like a scope on that one end. Let me erase. Let's see where we end up here. You gotta love Photoshop. Some really cool things about this software. I mean, it's so much fun. Except for the new price increases they're doing. Those really suck. But I shouldn't get into that topic right now. I should just continue working. That's a cool, I like that head shape right there. That really pops out well for me and works nice. That's pretty cool. Like that leg. Get a nice big support leg in the back here. Cool sort of geometric shape. Some covers on it. Pop out. Maybe some type of hydraulic system that's connecting up. It's hooking up. I find an interest in that stuff. When I was a kid, a couple of my friends I grew up with, their dads had businesses where they had some type of like light factory. My buddy Bruce his dad was the #1 manufacturer of horseshoes in the world here in Southern California. And we used to go over to their plant, and there's like these huge presses and big hydraulics coming, and there's even this like heat press that takes the aluminum horseshoe and it like heats it up, and it almost looks like a giant robotic head, that's looks like inside there they're making like the heart of a robot or something. It's pretty cool, the things you can take from just sort of normal life experiences that you see that you sort of take for granted, how you can incorporate those things into your sketch while you're working. Bear with me here and try to finish this up, block them in. This is cool because I've created something I wasn't going for, and I'm really liking the progression that this guy's starting to take. It's a fun shape. This is a lot more enjoyable, by the way, when you're listening to music. But unfortunately, I can't record myself doing anything with music anymore. I love YouTube. I think YouTube is a great little invention. There's so much, wonderful things that have happened from it in this digital age, and there's so much that we can do from it. But at the same time, with all that power and all that ability to get numerous hits and millions of viewers, also comes a lot of limitations. And you can see one of the limitations here is we can't play music in the background while we're working. That's a big no-no. Then to me, what's so important about that is that I like to pick music that influences the way that I work. So you can't hear anything I'm playing right now, but I like to find either something that's very easy listening and sort of flowing, and then that allows me to get what I call like my flow on, and I just sort of draw and stay in this great mood. Or I tend to listen to music that might be indicative of the time period and have some type of effect there. What I mean by that would be if I'm working on a series of castles, and something that might be from a medieval time period, it'd be in my best interest to listen to like the Braveheart soundtrack or the Gladiator soundtrack. Those are great for that. Whenever I'm designing anything that might be really evil, there's another band, an old 80s band called Dead Can Dance that I love to listen to. They have lots of like spooky sort of evil music. Soundtracks are always great. Those can sort of guide you through. For me, at least, I don't play any musical instruments, but I love music, and music definitely affects the way that I'm working. So what I'm doing now, I'm sort of going back. I'm looking at parts here that I like, like this headpiece right here, looking at the treads, little details that I like, and I like the fact that I should go in and just spend another 30 minutes and make a whole nother page off of parts, imagine just taking these parts. That'd be a great assignment. Take the parts you've already done here in your silhouettes, copy and paste them and make something different. I mean, you're going to create something totally different and new by copying and pasting elements that you have here that you would have never, ever even have thought of if you were drawing off of a white piece of paper. There's something to say about that and the overall cognitive learning ability that you have to develop. I mean, you're developing something here from your head, but then by copying and pasting and rotating variations of shapes from here, you're going to come up with something that's just totally different that you never even thought you could even do. When you look at the way a lot of artists like to work, one thing that I noticed is the way we worked as kids is often forgotten, obviously, for various reasons. But it actually was my daughter's birthday party this last weekend, and I went out, and that was a mistake, was having Pandora there. Go away, Pandora. And anyway, in my daughter's birthday party, one of the first things they do, we went to this. My daughter, of course, loves to draw and paint, right? She's very artistic, and we went to this local place by us it's like a drawing. I think they call it the drawing board, and they have classes, and you can have birthday parties there, and the kids come in for the birthday party, and they all get to make something. And one of the first things that they do is they take a canvas and they paint a blank canvas. They paint it full of color, because working with just a white canvas was like so intimidating. I watched a child who was, it was 7 years old, same age as my daughter, and she's going to draw a line, and one drop of ink fell on the white canvas, and she's like, oh no, wipe it off, hurry up, get it off. And it's like, it's okay, it's just a canvas. And then finally the instructor came out, and she's talking to a bunch of 7 and 8 year old girls, and she says, first thing you do is we're going to dip our paintbrush into blue paint, and we're just going to paint and cover the whole entire canvas. And that's the first thing that they did. And part of the goal for these little kids was to create turtles, some sea life. And it was so easy to do that, having a blank canvas, because then you're just painting up on top of that, and then you're going to pull shapes out of that blank canvas from behind there. And so after they put it down, they were able to, after they put the background down of like some blues, a little bit of green tints to them, they came in and they started putting down some yellows that were going to be like the turtle shell. The yellows totally stood out, and you were able to go in there. Now imagine doing that the opposite way. It wouldn't even make sense. And again, I think some of that is the same thing with thumbnailing here. I'm diving in, creating a bunch of shapes, sketching them, filling them in. But imagine if you did the opposite progression. I mean, it would just copy and paste a bunch of these. I've created all these shapes. I own the rights to them. So what if imagine if I had a library of multiple pages of thumbnails. In fact, I had this theory once that what if I did opposites? Like if I was working on something mechanical, go take a bunch of organic silhouettes and copy and paste them together, and then use those to come up with something. And the same principle, if I was working on something that was going to be very organic, what if I copied and pasted a bunch of vehicle silhouettes and then threw those together and see what I come up with? There might be something to say there for working in opposites and balancing out your work progression. You never know what you might come up with, Let me see here. I just keep sketching this out. I have a couple of friends that when they design, I've seen them thumbnail. Friends that I've worked with in the industry before on different projects. They do everything from create a new brush preset, and they go along and like stamp that same brush like 8 times, and then they come in and then they like modify that and build on top of that. I mean, that's one different overall progression or workflow that you can do. I've seen some other people just start with a base silhouette that's like their foundation, and then they duplicate that, come back on top of that, and then they spend some time and draw on that. One thing I'm not doing here is I'm sort of sketching things down first. Another way I like to work sometimes is sort of a positive and negative approach, where I might start with a whole black square, and then I go in with my eraser and I'm erasing out of the black square. And then seeing, it's sort of like I learned something about that in an etching class once when I was younger. It's a great approach to overall design. You're working from the other way back, going from one big negative shape, pulling out one positive white line, versus going the other way. So that could be a different approach too. I mean, imagine just taking a little cube that's black, filling it, putting it on your canvas, and then going in and erasing parts and seeing what you come up with. Nothing wrong with that. I got one for you. What if you took a black cube, put it down, came back with a lasso, and selected different parts of there and then deleted and then took a shape out of there? What if you took that black cube, closed your eyes, and selected a bunch of areas while holding shift in the lasso, selected a bunch of areas, hit delete, and then went into that and created another shape out of that? That's another way. That would be a total, total pure creative workflow that you could introduce into your design process. So, I better stop babbling on so much. If I don't talk about something fun, you guys are going to be bored to tears. That's the hardest thing. I've been a student before. I remember when I took an online class many, many moons ago. Not too many. I mean, about 7 years ago or so. And I remember in that online class, listening. Sometimes instructors get caught up in their work and they don't talk. So I like to talk a little bit. I don't want it to be totally boring to the viewer. I like this Look at this. I love this right here. This 1, 2, 3. I love that tank tread. You see, this is a cool idea here. See, it sort of makes up one base triangle, but then with the white, the negative shape of the white coming in there over the positive of the black. Well, that's my interpretation of it. It sort of segregates those treads out, but to me, it makes a visual read as one big triangle. That's sort of a cool ideation or thought process to invoke into part of your work and your sketching. Everybody, I think all artists develop their own approach somehow, and a lot of people don't like to share it. That's cool. I don't mind whatsoever. If anything, I look at it as some artists are very top secret about their progression and their workflow. I don't understand why. You just, you're here to just share and grow. And the more I talk with people that I've worked with, the more I tend to grow, because they might say something really cool or inspire me, or I might make a comment that they wouldn't have said, and then they might make a comment about that, which sends me in another direction on my process. I think that's part of the whole game here. Enjoy the process. Enjoy the flow. We're at 53 minutes here, almost. Yeah, what do we know? 53 minutes and 14 seconds, right there. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 great thumbnails. It's worth it. Worth every minute.